Well, of course, the biggest story has to do with the IEBC and what's happening there. We'll try and touch on what's happening with this discussion to do with a referendum, because this week started there. On Sunday, a number of young MPs and leaders, mainly from NASA, ODM and some from ANC, went to a church service and ignited that debate about what should happen at the top, the restructuring of the executive, ensuring that there are more positions at the top to actually be able to cover the different people who feel marginalized, probably. But that discussion died as soon as it started, because a day later, IEBC, 3 commissioners resigned, and that is what has been making the headlines this entire week. Now, the standard secret night talks that killed IEBC, that's a big one. 5 top state officials were involved in talks 2 days before 3 commissioners resigned from their electoral commission. Now, they've given the chronology of events, and it's very interesting that on Saturday morning, this is April 14th, a CS placed a call to 2 commissioners and requested a meeting. A decision was made to contact a 3rd commissioner. The 3rd commissioner took a late-night flight to Nairobi. The commissioner then joined colleagues who were already with the 5 state officials for the talks. On Monday, the 3 announced that they were quitting in protest, accusing Chebukati of high-handedness. The move caught Chebukati by surprise as he prepared to address a staff meeting. I'm trying to change the tense from what they've written. On Tuesday, Chebukati and the remaining commissioners woke up to find their security withdrawn as calls from both NASA and Jubilee to have him quit intensified. Now, details are coming out. Of course, I've spoken to at least one of the commissioners who resigned, and they said, yes, it was a personal decision after so much reflection, after time, and because it had been a long time coming. That's what she said, the one I spoke to. But it appears that, yes, there was a hand, and now it's pointed directly at state officials, a CS to be exact. This is straight, pointing straight at the executive. Let's start with you, Bwana Kimani Wamatangi. This means that the executive had something to do with the resignation, with the wars at IEBC.
Well, I would...
at least this is what the headline suggests.
I would take a different view, because, you know, the words, the statements of the commissioners themselves were full of the story behind the story. If you listened to them, there's one word they kept on repeating: untenable. And when they say that the continued stay is untenable, partly they would blame it on the chairperson. And I would want to also remind our viewers and you, and sorry, I forgot to say good morning to our viewers. You know, at the same day, remember, Fred, that there was an ongoing hearing in the National Assembly. Then in that hearing, what was going on was a contest between the 2 former bosses, Oswago, Chiloba, and Hassan. And this was about tendering and tenderpreneuring and how contracts were awarded. And it is very difficult right now for anyone to say or to presume that there is not more than what meets the eye or what was being said on the contest, or about the contest between these remaining commissioners who are there, or the commissioners who are there. Remember, this fallout came after their own meeting, and they were narrating how, and it was also covered by the press, that indeed the fallout came. It was no longer possible for them to continue after they had met and the discussions they had. And that tells you, for example, if this was centered around the exit of Chiloba, what is it that is so important or so crucial? What is it about Chiloba that has got one faction pulling that way and the other one this way? And I think at the end of the day, maybe the news has not stopped. That's all I would predict. A lot more will come out of this. Maybe much more is going to come out.
And granted, whatever is happening at IEBC is murky enough. They already have their own issues. That we accept. But it appears there was a hand from outside the IEBC that actually nudged them into pressing that self-destruct button. That yes, they've had these problems even last year, but they did not do what they've done now. Someone else actually nudged them into this action.
Yes. You know, when you want to know that Wamatangi is not being very truthful, he hesitates. He knows this is a conspiracy. And this conspiracy started a long time ago. And let me just put it into perspective. In fact, you don't need the Standard to tell you that there's a hand of somebody in Jubilee in this, and it has many fronts. And this scheme started before the repeat elections. If you recall, Kimani Wamatangi and his colleagues from the Senate and National Assembly formed a special committee between themselves and amended the law on two aspects. One is to change the criteria of the appointment and the qualifications of a chairperson. What was the reason? They wanted the vice chair, this lady, Consolata, to become the chair. Yes. Chebukati was supposed to resign. The second thing was to reduce quorum, because Chebukati, Roslyn Akombe, and another one was supposed to resign or forced to resign. That became law. They did the law on their own. They made mistakes on their own, and the court 2 weeks ago nullified those amendments. So that scheme failed. So they moved to scheme number 2. Scheme number 2 was for this other faction, which was the one that was opposing the faction led by Chebukati to resign, so that then they forced the 3 not to have quorum, because 3 out of 7 is not quorum, because quorum is 7. Yes. So the IEBC is dysfunctional. The third thing is, what is it? Just check, what is it that they are trying to hide? The August 8th elections were so badly conducted that the ghost of those elections are going to haunt this IEBC all the way to some place I wouldn't want to mention. And they are trying to hide. The cost of these elections, Fred Ndimuli, 50 billion shillings. By the time you unearth the snakes of what Chiloba was doing, of what the rest were doing, you will be shocked. And lastly, Senator Boni Halwale and myself, Deputy Party Leader Ford Kenya, sat in Windsor for a long time, trying to find a method of making sure that the commissioners don't get their hands in the till. Number 2, at that particular time, we want one Ezra Chiloba, do not get involved in the tender on ballots. Yes. He continued with that. We also mentioned that there were adverse recommendations that came against the whole secretariat, all of them, there are 4 or 5 of them. And we advised the new commission to deal with them. They refused to deal with them. They went and became part of the cartel. So it has 2 fronts. Yes. Tenderpreneurship, money, and politics. The idea of forcing Chebukati to resign, withdrawing the security of the commissioners, and the calls that are being made out there that there will be no referendum, there will be no executive prime minister, etc., etc. Where are these statements coming from? Have you seen a document suggesting we are going to have a referendum? And lastly, Omweshimiwa, the President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, if they are not careful, their handshake will become something else. It will become sour grapes. Because all these plots, they are all plots that are trying to scuttle whatever it is they are thinking, because we don't know what they are thinking, or whatever it is that they are drawing. Because I suspect, from what I saw on TV, that the document that is being prepared somewhere has leaked somewhere. That is why you're having this discussion that you said was killed by this story about IEBC. So it's not an isolated case. Yes. It's possible that the people who are opposing the handshake, both in Jubilee and possibly some even in the coalition of NASA, are regrouped. Yes. Thank you.
And Dr. Halole, you're not necessarily a fan of the handshake. Do you agree with what Senator Mutula Kilonzo says? That's probably all that's happening is an attempt to scuttle what would have come out of that handshake.
I think he's put it very well, but I look at these good Kenyans, Connie Maina, Paul Kurkat, and Margaret Mwachanya. Please, they should not go public in wanting to tell the world that all Kenyans are foolish. By saying that after deep reflection, they are falling back to the suggestion that they are men and women of integrity. Rubbish. The only person of integrity at IEBC was Roslyn Akombe. The time to demonstrate integrity was the time she did. What they are doing now, they are now found with a skunk. The skunk has got all manner of odors mixed. The first one is the murder of Chris Musando. That skunk is stinking. The second one is the announcing of the man who lost the election on 8th of August as president of Kenya. It's a very big scam. The third one, which is stinking, is the fact that corruption has now started fighting back. Chiroba, it looks he was not eating alone, because the amount of money at play, he said 53 billion shillings. You can't possibly eat alone. So the people he was eating with have been telling him, do this, do that, do this, and he does it, but it doesn't work. So they have decided to fight back by just removing the entire commission. Now the commission is gone. Kenyans must not waste time reading this thing in the Standard. This headline is deliberate. It has been put there either by a National Intelligence Service or some of the person placed in a high office, so that they can drive
to justify the removal of the IEBC.
They are driving the national psyche into a particular direction. The simple thing is that these three commissioners, none of them resigned. All of them either were sacked or they were asked to so-called resign. We, as people who have decided that we will, unlike Wamatangi, who can defend anything so long as it has got the word government, we are going to insist. Wamatangi, we shall insist, and we will not stop. We want to know the tender of supply of technology for the repeat presidential election. The approved fee was 800 million. Why did Chiroba pay 2.4 billion? You must answer.
Okay.
You must answer, Wamatangi. Why were satellite phones that were never used?
Senator Wamatangi has never been in the IEBC, Bana Halwale. Plus, you must answer. We do not have the luxury of actually probing what happened at the IEBC to that extent.
In the rules of debate.
Yeah.
But you see, now these guys, for lack of content, you know, they have been used to boxing. And they've been using to flying missiles in all directions. Yes. And especially, and you know, these are symptoms of the effect of the handshake. Because, you know, one of the things that we all must say, truthfully and clearly, is that although what Mutula Kilonzo says, that handshake may result to whatever they may even want to imagine it to be. But there's one thing that handshake did, which was very good for this country. It lowered political temperatures, and people now can think straight and work. And you know, now for those who had gotten accustomed to the habit of just waking up in the morning and picking political bullets and firing wild anywhere, like Boni Halwale. Now that's why you find in the absence of any other target existing, you must look for one. That's why you're talking about Wamatangi. I've never been a commissioner in the IEBC.
He has not been in the IEBC, so he's not able to
but I didn't to say something.
The question is, and I give you that opportunity,
yes.
Away from what's happening at the IEBC, the issues about tenders, and some of them bordering on criminal. This is crime. And of course, the various agencies that are tasked to do that will follow up. But looking at it politically, what does the exit of this IEBC Commission, Chebukati's team, mean? And who stands to benefit the most politically?
You know, let's face facts, and as we face them, let me just put one fact straight, because Mutula Kilonzo spoke about it earlier. But when the committee that was convened, of which I was a member, attempted to do things, one, he said to lower the qualifications of the chairman so that the vice chair could have chaired that particular committee. We all know, because we are Kenyans, and Mutula Kilonzo, we were with you here, that at that time, Chiloba had threatened to exit, Chebukati had threatened to exit the IEBC at a time when we were heading to the elections, days 2. And in the existing act before, as the law was, if he did exit, then what would have been the consequence is that the country would have been in limbo, having waited and financed that election, and that would have been not only chaos, but a fiasco and a disaster. 2, on this other story that we lowered the quorum,
Yes.
so that a few of them could sit and just have a few making decisions.
Yes.
This gentleman here is a lawyer of very high repute, by the way. In case you have any matter pending, take it to him, he will execute it. He knows the law. And he knows what the Constitution says,
Yes.
that for a commission, actually, to be alive, breathing, and well, it only requires, as per the Constitution, 3 commissioners. Only 3. That's what the law says. And so, what we were saying at that time, and mind you, Fred, even right now when Chiloba and the 3 have remained in office, they cannot be said either to be defunct or dysfunctional, because the Constitution recognizes that a commission requires 3 commissioners.
I'm sure you'd like to differ on that, and I'll give you an opportunity.
No, he cannot differ on the law, but he can differ on any other point. But what I'm saying is this, that our provision in that act was that at least 3 bearing a majority at that particular time, but a minimum of 3 can be able to make policy decisions or decisions at that particular time of the sitting. So there was no cunning. But let me now answer what you have asked. Who stands to benefit? Fred, unless we want to cover our eyes or bury our heads in the sand or become liars outright, it is clear at this particular time that what this country requires to be able to move forward is a fresh breath whereby even the political future, and as we are moving on towards all the functions of the IEBC, remember we are heading to a very important function carried out by the IEBC, and that's boundaries review in a few months. Now, if you are going to be having an IEBC in place that is tussling and pulling from this side to the other, how do you expect them to carry some of those functions? And because if you remember, even when we went to the elections, what politicians and especially Parliament tried to do was to administer probably life support to IEBC at that particular time, so that we could be able to deliver to Kenyans what they were waiting for. That was the election at the timed dates which were constitutional. If the efforts that were rendered by so many, not only by Parliament, to make sure that IEBC continued to ensure that they have done what they were elected to do, then there would have been even a bigger disaster. They would have pressed that self-destruct button way before. Okay. And so, in my view, there is nothing really left that one would argue right now, with all due respect to Chebukati, even the remaining ones, that they can stand before Kenyans right now with all that has happened between themselves, not from outside, that they can go and say that they can be able to carry out any function.
Senator Mutula Kilonzo, because the debate now will move on to how to replace or reconstitute the IEBC. That, given the kind of history we've had coming up with a commission to carry out our elections, means that it could take quite a while. Yes, there are other things that IEBC is required to do between now and 2022. Boundaries review, the possibility of a referendum to actually change the executive, the structure of the executive. These are things that, yes, should be done between now and 2022. Bringing the debate about how to reconstitute a new commission, which could take us even 2 years. This changes the timelines. Someone could have actually manipulated this situation to ensure we do not have an IEBC for the longest time possible, and therefore affect these other processes, don't you think?
Yes, yes. I don't know which commissioner you spoke to. I forgot to ask, but I hope you didn't speak to the one who resigned with immediately effect.
he must disclose.
He must disclose.
If he doesn't disclose,
I do not disclose my sources.
Then we shall stop saying the truth.
I have that right now to disclose my sources as a journalist.
But let me answer Wamatangi before I go to the criteria. Wamatangi makes one mistake. And the mistake in law is called the golden rule of interpretation. The golden rule of interpretation under the law is that the law must be interpreted in such a manner that it doesn't lead to an absurdity. Now, the argument he has raised, I've seen it on Twitter, that since the Constitution prescribes a minimum of 3, since there are 3, they have quorum. It's nothing like that. Quorum, the Constitution prescribed a formula of odd numbers between 3 and 9. So to suggest that if you are 3, you have quorum, and if you are 5, you have quorum, if you have 7, quorum is 3, it would be an absurdity in law. Now, if the law that brought into effect the IEBC as a commission under Article 250, under Article 88 and 89 is the IEBC Act. And that is the reason why Wamatangi and his cohorts attempted to change the parameters from 5 to 3. If at that time, and they are very wise gentlemen in the Senate and in the National Assembly, if they thought at that time that 3 it constitutes minimum, they would not have attempted to amend the law, which the court found to have been unconstitutional. To this election, Senator Boni Halolo will tell you that this issue about the selection and the criteria and the number was a big deal by Jubilee. They made a lot of weather about it. In fact, at some point, they told us this is a deal breaker. Halwale and I laughed the whole night. We said, oh, okay, is it a deal breaker? Fine, we'll give you what you want. So by the time we agreed on the question, because Jubilee wanted 9 members, and we, Boni Halwale and I wanted a lean commission, we were at 5. We did a rough mathematics between 9 and 5. We came up with 7. That's number 1. Number 2, because there were suspicions. This thing was so suspicious. Everybody was suspicious about everything, even a fly. We decided to put religious leaders as part of the selection panel so that at the very least, everybody would feel comfortable that these people would not be carrying baggage politically. But we put a caveat that this selection panel would be only for these commissioners. So you have an urgent issue pending, that you do not have a selection panel and criteria for electing the next commission or the next set of commissioners to replace the 4. And if the 3 resign, if the sort of pressure these guys are putting on them withdrawing security is anything to go by. So what I'm saying is that we have a problem. And I said it before, that this is a grand conspiracy. It's like a grand haste, Ocean 6, that started a long time ago. But all of it is an attempt to hide. You should be asking the question, before we go into this early selection criteria, and how do we move Kenyans together to try and resolve the crisis that Boni Halwale is talking about? There are 2 things. Number 1, Parliament should call for a special audit of these election expenses so that the story by Boni, and it has been made in public, disclosed by one Wycliffe Musalia Mudavadi, Madividi, should come into the fore. The second issue is that we put in the law, in the regulations on the technology, that there should be an audit of the technology used. The third one is that there was there's a special audit that we came up with on the register. If you read that report that is in Parliament, you will be shocked beyond belief, because KPMG, for whatever it's worth, they found that one of the weaknesses of the system and where we are going to have infiltration is the servers. The only way to exercise the ghost of these servers, what Chiloba attempted to hide, because those technology experts were in Nairobi during the presidential elections, is an audit of those systems. So that by the time we sit down to put in a new commission, we have dealt with the problems that have come from the past, 1992 elections, 1997 elections, because other than what Otiende Amolo suggested during the review of this commission, that we now should look at the constitution that provides even a possibility that we can hire a foreigner like Judge Sachs in the Kriegler Commission. That possibility now becomes alive, because we have religious leaders. That has not worked. Politicians say put members, like I've seen a proposal by one member of the National Assembly, that political parties should be allowed to put representatives. Is that a better selection criteria than the one we put? It's going to have doubt, because again, we are all carrying baggage.
And the question now is, do we have time to actually go through all this, get a selection panel, then eventually get a commission, then eventually it's able to carry out the boundaries review, and if a possibility of a referendum, all this before 2022? Is it possible?
There is all the time. Time is not a problem.
Given the kind of haggling that politicians will engage in on simply how to constitute their selection panel.
No, that haggling, don't listen to it. Never. It is the late Michael Kijana Wamalwa who told us on the floor of the House that there is something called the common sense of Parliament. The moment Parliament creates common sense about an issue that you have been haggling over for 2 years will be decided in 30 minutes one afternoon in Parliament. So I know these things are doable. But the more important question is the one which you posed and Wamatangi didn't respond to. You asked him, who stands to benefit from all these things? There are two people who are going to benefit. The first one are the thieves who are struggling, to use Mutula's words, for a cover-up for the billions that they have stolen. The second person who is going to benefit is this person who wants to use unfair means to become the president of Kenya in 2022.
Do you have a name?
You refuse to disclose the name of the commissioner.
You're not a journalist, you're
So
a politician.
you have lost that morality.
You don't enjoy the same rights.
Okay, but then this person, he's going to be known in due course.
We know now it's a he.
There is a theory. Yes, it's always a he. Women have no problem with these women. Women are very harmless. When I say harmless, I include Maina, who has the commissioner, and Margaret. They are harmless. They were just being ordered around. This person who wants to force a particular outcome in 2022, he better be careful. If he is not the one who is behind this manipulation, it means they are out to completely throw him into the dustbin. And the person I'm referring to is the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. The Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya and his handlers have never stopped to say that they are already in office in 2022. Mr. Deputy President, if it is not you behind these things, then your goose is cooked, for the reason that you knew the system which you used to mess the 2017 election. So if you are not the one behind this cooking, it means they now want to put in a new system which you will not be able to control. You have been bragging that you unaweza kupanga kila mtu, now utapangwa. That's what's going on.